Ain't no outskilling this nothing up city beep. So if you're in that stuff from your third this look hops in there, it's no fair enough. So if you remember them back, I'm a well. Hi and welcome back to Game Over Movie Reviews. I know everyone's doing this backwards intro thing for their Tenet reviews, but you'd be disappointed if I didn't at least try it, wouldn't you? Tenet was written and directed by Christopher Nolan and stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki and Kenneth Brannagh. This was my third trip to the cinema since lockdown has eased, but this is the first new film I've seen. I've seen a couple of reissues, one of them actually a Nolan film, Batman Begins, and of course, because it's Nolan, I had to see it in IMAX. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. And if you've seen Tenet, what did you think? Leave a comment below. Did you love it? Is it one of Nolan's best? Not so sure? Need another rewatch? This is a spoiler-free review, so I'll shrink down my plot synopsis to a very basic level. Probably what you've gathered from the trailer anyway. John David Washington plays a CIA operative who's trying to stop something really bad happening, and there's some time and physics things going on. I didn't love Tenet. I liked it. I liked some of it very much, but there are some odd creative choices which really hampered my enjoyment of this film. The good stuff first. Robert Pattinson continues to take on varied and impressive roles and he's really excellent here. It could be that he's given a chance to shine because his character seems to be the only one with a little bit of charisma and a little bit of intrigue and a little bit of emotion. This is Christopher Nolan, so obviously it's going to look incredible, and it really does, especially on the big screen. Some of the scenes here are just mind-blowing. The editing, the planning, the choreography, the sheer ambition that goes into some of these scenes is really next level. And I spent a lot of time kind of in awe at the technical aspect of this film. I really enjoyed Ludwig Göransson's soundtrack. There's quite a lot of tension which comes directly from the music in scenes where the action isn't necessarily tense, but there's a lot of build-up with the soundtrack. And there's a lot of clever touches with reverse and forward, playing back and forward with these little phrases. The music plays with your head as much as the visuals. Unfortunately, there's more bad stuff than good. The protagonist, who's very blandly actually referred to as that, is a bit of a blank slate. And John David Washington, he plays it quite cold and flat. I don't know if the flaw is his or whether it comes from Nolan's direction, but there's very little charisma or anything to buy into with him. Nolan's always expressed his love of Bond and that he wanted to do a Bond film, and Inception definitely had Bond vibes, especially with the big bass ending. And this is, again, another Bond effort. Bit Mission Impossible as well, but Bourne occasionally, more straight, cold, clinical version of those films. But what makes Bond special is Bond himself. He's very suave, very charismatic. There's lots going on with him. He's got this dark humour. He can be nasty, vicious. I wanted a bit more of that from this protagonist. He's just a bit of a blank slate for me. With a touch more charisma or intrigue in this character, I think I might have cared a bit more about him because I didn't care that much for him really. And there was a lot of scenes where there was no tension because I didn't care that much for this character. And as an extension of that, the whole film feels devoid of heart and emotion. There's really very little to grasp onto emotionally. It feels like Nolan's straining to make this film more complex than it actually needs to be. It spends a lot of time explaining. This film is very exposition heavy. The stories and ideas here are so big that constant explanation is needed to be given to the protagonist, which is us really. But the vast majority of this exposition is done through quite dull conversations which get pretty repetitive quite quickly. But the most frustrating part of this reliance on exposition is it's not the science and the physics and the time-bending stuff that is explained in great depth. That's covered fairly well, actually, fairly concisely, even though it's quite complicated. It's actually the general plot and the character motivations, why they want things, what they're trying to do, that always seems to be kind of blocked and hidden from us. It never seems 100% clear what the protagonist needs to do next to move the story on. It always seems obfuscated by something, and yes, that is the first time I've ever said obfuscated. Also, these exposition-heavy conversations have a definite sort of staccato feeling, which began to grow with me quite quickly. The protagonist will ask a question of someone will explain something, the protagonist will ask another question, more explanation, more questions, more explanation, and almost the same rhythm throughout the film. What's this about? Yeah, it's this. But what about? Well, this is... Yeah, but what about? and so on and so on, almost like a tennis match. To compound the general feeling that you never quite know what's going on, you never quite know what the characters are motivated to do, the dialogue audio is so quiet here, and Nolan's done it again. He's done this in the past. It's very frustrating. There are certain scenes where I was literally going like that, and this is an IMAX film, blazingly loud, and I was at the back, craning my neck to try and hear what the characters are saying. And the really weird thing about this is it's obviously on purpose. Why? I don't believe someone as technically savvy as Nolan has done this by accident. Kenneth Branagh is okay as a bad guy. He's quite surprisingly menacing and scary. But the more you find out about his overall goals and motivation, the more thin he becomes. He starts to go into sort of stereotypical Bond supervillain territory. And it's a bit... You just don't buy what he's trying to do. With the baddie's weak motivation, that feeling you're always playing catch-up with the main character's motivation, and that you're never quite on board with the plot. The final third, which should have been a big, exciting, tense section, is just big. Because this scene does look massive, it really is big, very ambitious, there's lots to look at, but it's not as tense and exciting as it should have been because of these issues. Finally, Aaron Taylor-Johnson is awful again. I don't know how this man keeps getting roles in big films. I think he's really terrible, and he's very dull, very unbelievable in this film. So whilst I liked a lot of Tenet, there's a lot of creative choices that hold it back from being a really great film. If it had the heart of, say, Interstellar, I think we'd probably be discussing another Nolan classic. But this film often feels like a demonstration of what he can do as a filmmaker rather than a storyteller. Tenet is a brilliantly made, entertaining disappointment. My score for Tenet is 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching.